My 2 week senior experience. My name's Josh Cohn, and for my 2 weeks, I chose to work in my workshop and create some knives that I had been waiting to work on and some other projects that had just been sitting. And just to give you some comparison to what you'll see now, on the left is the first knife that came out of my shop about 4 years ago. And honestly, it was terrible. I keep this still in a drawer. I look at it and I laugh. My parents, they also laugh at it very often because this is what kept them from wanting me to do this in the first place. They thought it was very strange that I was making these kind of a shiv looking knives. So, as you see on the right, though, my profile has grown from what it was before, much bigger, and I have kind of really gotten into this, and I really enjoy doing it now. And it's at much higher level of professionalism than it was before, and it's kind of just a process for me, and it's something that I enjoy, and I've turned into a hobby and a business. So these 2 weeks gave me a good chance to work on it. Where I began, so the cleanup is where I always have to begin when I start projects. As you can see, this is my clean workshop. It is very clean. It is rarely this clean. And honestly, when it is this clean, I can get work done though. The floors are clean, and my bench is free of all the other stuff that's going to be on top of it, as you'll see in the end when you see the final stages of everything being thrown out as I work through all these steps. Week one, you see that I started off with these 6 knives in my hand, and it ends up coming down to 5 because I took one of them out. I ended up having to work on a little bit more, and I just didn't want to waste these 2 weeks working on something like this when I could be working on the others. So I started off here with a Scotch-Brite belt, which is very similar to the stuff that you use actually to clean your pots and pans, except it's in a belt form and it's on the sanding machine behind it. And each one of these knives is then polished using that belt essentially to get a much nicer finish from what it was before. And this process is all done by hand without a jig, and I use a light above it to get each angle kind of perfect to make sure that I'm hitting each spot correctly, because if I'm not, it looks very wonky and it's noticeable. So the right hand picture is the final results of this, and in the next slide you'll see some more finished work. So right here we have some of the finished ones from that whole, I guess, stage and step of the process of what I do, which is the grinding process. And this is the final stage of the grinding process. Each one of these was taken on the Scotch-Brite belt onto a fine Scotch-Brite belt and then polished up. And this is the final results. And these looked really good. And as you can see from my first knife, it looks nothing like this. These are way more quality, and the shiny part that I'm polishing is known as the bevel. And the bevel in these is very hard to get accurate on both sides, and it's something that I pride myself in being able to do now. And these look extremely good, and in my head, I was very proud of what I did, and that came from the focus that I had. And honestly, having the focus to do this, as I'm going to show here, let me do a lot more work. This is something that would have taken me months and months to do, with school in between and taking breaks and not having the focus to just do it. And I start off here with cutting out my handles and attaching them onto a liner made of fiberglass material known as G10 that is perfectly flat, and it's actually very durable, and it allows for a better bond between the metal surface of the knife handle and the wood when you use the epoxy. And it's a good barrier and it adds a very nice pop, and it looks very pretty in the end. So here are the stages of the cutting out, attaching it to the liner, and then finally gluing them all up. And I don't know if you see the swirly American flag one. That is for a separate build that I put in between, and it's going to be a kitchen knife that I'm working on. Don't have any pictures of it sadly in here yet, but it's something that I'm working on in the future. So I figured I might as well just glue it up because I had it sitting on my bench. So once I was done, I decided to, cut them out, attach them onto my knives, just quickly with my hands just to see how they looked, and I roughed them to shape, and they looked good. I didn't have any gaps in my liners. I had to check because if you have a gap in your liner, you have big issues. And this time that I had that was extra to just focus on what I was doing let me have more prep work time, which is essential for this because if you don't have the prep work, you just have failure. And as you can see, each one of these fits up perfectly. The sizing was just right, didn't mess up, and that was all from the time and the prep work that I had. So the weekend passed, and then I switched on to this, which is the final stages of the handle. Each one of these handles was brought to a closer finish than even before, so that way they was more directly attached to the handle on the glue up, so that it's almost to steel and wood. It's more noticeable in person and hard to explain, but each one is more directly cut and trimmed to the exact size now at this stage. And then the front of each one is then polished because you cannot do that later. You have to do it before gluing it up because once it's attached to the knife, you will mess with the finish trying to polish the fronts of these. And polishing the fronts of them is a sign of professionalism. Not a lot of people remember to do this, especially in the early stages of knife making. And I've had to teach a lot of newer folks to do this because they don't really remember. It's not something you think about. And I mean, it's slipped my mind in the past, and I've been doing this for almost 4 years now. And as you see in these pictures, there's more prep work. I even cut my pins in advance, and each one of these pins is cut to size, shaped and rounded at the end slightly so it goes in without any issue and causing a breakage in the wood because it is still wood, and if you hit it hard, it will cause splintering and it'll break, and that is something that you do not want happening because this stuff tends to be rare and expensive, and especially if it's for a custom build, that person tends to have their heart kind of set on their desires, and if they don't get what they want, they get sad. So here we show a glue up in one of the stages. This is not a glue up of one of the knives you've seen yet. This was one that I finished though. Um, I brought it up to the final stages. It's sitting on my bench now, and this weekend, once I'm cleaning my shop, I will work on it. But this is what a glued up knife looks like. You have to take the handle with the wood attached to it in the fiberglass material, the G10, and then pin it on with epoxy and use clamps, and the clamps help to distribute the epoxy and actually put a little pressure on it. And after the 24 hours, it'll be fully cured, and then you can work with it and do your final stages of the sanding process. And on the right, I worked on this knife. I finished it in between because, I just had a little bit of time and it was made from some scrap. And this knife, if you're curious, is modeled after the lapel daggers that were used in World War II by the OSS, which were spies. So here we have each knife attached fully. The handles are put on, the pins are done, everything's sanded, and it's not at the final stages of the sanding, but it's very, very close. The only thing I have to do now is do hand sanding. This is straight off of a machine, but everything is flush to the surfaces. And as you can see, I wet the wood and I wet the resin on the left-hand side, and it all looks very good. And I was very impressed. I'm very happy with my work, and most of the time, I kind of look down on my work and I find something wrong with it. But I mean, having this extra time just goes to show that having focused time to do something, you can do it right. So each one of these, I felt that I did everything right and everything was done up to standards and certainly surpassed some of the ones that I had in the past. So here's kind of my last day of work. I finished this yesterday, and it's actually being shipped off today to get a sheath for it. And this was a custom build for somebody who's been waiting patiently 2 months now. And I told them, I actually explained what I'm doing for my internship, experience. And I said to them, I was like, I'm going to have some time to actually work. And they were very excited because they're getting this in the mail soon as the sheath is done. And they're going to get to enjoy it. And I got to enjoy making it, and they're going to get to enjoy handing it down to future generations and carrying it for a while and keeping it on display. And this guy's been texting me nonstop how excited he is to own it. And this is just what I love doing about making something that has a purpose, and I got to see more in depth of what it would be if I use this as a real focus as a project or a job of the future, and what it takes to do something like this not necessarily just making knives as a job, but anything as a job takes full focus and it takes your full priority for a span of time because you can't work on something in between halfway and just work on it partially. And especially in something like this, I learned it takes focus to put a foot down for, I'm going to take 2 to 3 hours at a time and just work. No breaks in between, no stopping, and you can really just get stuff done. And the proof of this and the results is right here. My workshop in the end is filthy, and I finished cleaning it up today mainly. I got a little bit of work to go with the sweeping, but it's mostly done. But as you can see, it's really awful in this picture. I got stuff everywhere, and like I said, I don't put stuff away. But it goes to show that having this time really gave me time to work because everything is out on the table, everything from each individual step is still there, and I can look at it in my head and I can walk through everything that I've done, and probably more than the 20 hours per week that I've spent now just doing this. And I mean, I loved it. It was really great, and I enjoyed it. And thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoyed the sort of rant about what I love to do. Thanks.